Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And we have something, well, I'd like to say unusual, but it's not. It should be. Unfortunately, what you're about to see is not all that unusual in World of Warships. We have a division of 3 here. You may recognise some of them. This was actually sent in by Bloke. A lot of people say, Jingles, I love listening to your videos because of your calm, soothing voice. I do get that a lot. But Bloke is the guy that I like to listen to and watch streaming because of his calm, soothing voice. Bloke is in HMS Plymouth. This is obviously not him. He's joined by and divisioned up with a couple of other King of the Sea tournament veterans whom you may know, Killabin in HMAS Brisbane, and Quagsire of the Pond here in HMS St. Vincent. Yep, the British Tier 10 battlecruiser. Not a particularly pretty looking ship, but surprisingly effective. Yep, another British battlecruiser video. Was it the Duncan we saw last week? Yeah, you sit around waiting forever for British battlecruiser videos to show up, and then 2 of them show up at once. They're like buses. Anyway, as you've probably noticed, this particular battle is going to be seen from the perspective of Quagsire of the Pond here in HMS St. Vincent. Sadly, Bloke did send me his replay in as well, so we could have had a meanwhile at the other end of the map perspective going on here. And I did watch it, and it was hilarious, but for some reason I can't seem to find the recording. I may have screwed up. So you're just going to have to take my word for it when I tell you that Bloke, well, pretty much everybody involved in this division is going to be having a very stressful day, but Bloke in particular, because that enemy carrier decided it didn't like him right from the start and focused him down this entire match. He does get his revenge, however, and honestly I wish I had been able to find the footage because it was quite frankly hilarious. I'll talk about it when it happens, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. Thankfully, I did at least manage to remember to press record when I was watching this, Quagsire in the St. Vincent, because the serious carrying in this battle is definitely going to occur right here at this end of the map. Now remember, this is a battle cruiser, it's not a battleship. It's got battleship guns, and it's fast, but in order to achieve the kind of speeds that a battlecruiser manages, it has to sacrifice armour. It is very much a bit of a glass cannon. It has a pitifully small health pool, less than 80,000 hit points for a Tier 10 battleship. The armour is paper. It has an exposed above water citadel. Oof, there we go. I don't think that was actually a citadel hit, but it hurt all the same. It's also a huge target, so it's difficult to miss, although if you build for it, it can be surprisingly stealthy. And it is armed with 9 18-inch guns. And if you're wondering why he's firing the high explosive, well, it has British battleship high explosive shells. It also has British battleship armour piercing shells, which means that they have a shorter fuse than normal, which is great for shooting at cruisers, but not so good for shooting at battleships, which is why he's using the high explosive here. Oh, and did I mention that the armour was bad? The belt armour is not good. The bow and stern armour is even worse, allowing this ship to be overmatched and potentially citadel from the front by every battleship in its weight class. He's not fighting up here alone, however. You see the Shimakaze, who loitered around in that smoke screen just a little bit too long and got radared by the Salem, which Killabin is attempting to deal with in HMAS Brisbane. He's launched some torpedoes up there, and the Georgia looks like it just got clapped by Shimakaze torpedoes. That's great news, because you really don't want to be getting shot at by battleships in this thing. It's even less able to take a hit than something like the Schlieffen. Okay, Killabin in the Brisbane has managed to sink the Salem. That's great news. Quagsire's managed to get a fire set on the Hanover, although the presence of a smokescreen up there is very, very worrying. I'm pretty sure the Hanover doesn't generate a smokescreen, so that means there's probably an enemy destroyer up here as well. Although, curiously, nobody is spotting Quagsire right now. He did get momentarily spotted by enemy aircraft. Of course, with the Shimakaze making a run for it, and all of those smoke screens in the way, nobody's able to actually spot the host of enemy ships up to the north. And we really could use a respot. Okay, the Shimakaze's manning up and he's going back in. Because we could really use a respot, not just on the Hanover, but the Henri IV, and especially the Georgia, because it did just get the shit clapped out of it by the Shimakaze's torpedoes. There's the Henri IV. The Georgia should be an easy kill. Okay, he's now being targeted by, well, basically everybody. So, ouch. Well, that could have been a lot worse. There's the Georgia. It's managed to recover a substantial amount of health. That's a real shame, because it only had a couple of thousand health left. Quagsire's gone undetected. He's switching to the armour piercing and waiting for that Georgia to straighten out and give him a good broadside to shoot at. There it is. 9 18-inch armour piercing shells. Short fused, so not the best choice for dealing with battleship belt armour, but close enough for government work. The Georgia is down. That's 1 cruiser and 1 battleship destroyed on the enemy team. We are now 200 points and 1 cap circled up, and if any further proof were required that there is an enemy destroyer lurking around up there somewhere, those torpedoes disappearing off to the right hand side of the screen should be ample evidence. And those torpedoes over there, and also the fact that a Shimakaze was spotted lurking around here not that long ago, but he's definitely still here. The fact that there is almost certainly an enemy Shimakaze lurking around here is extremely bad news, of course, not just for Quagsire, but also for the friendly Shimakaze, because all of the things being equal, they're going to spot each other at the same time. And that guy can't afford to get spotted. He is going to lose any gunfight that he gets involved in. And at the kind of detection ranges where a Shimakaze is going to get spotted, you don't have a lot of time to dodge. In fact, you don't have a lot of time to generate a smoke screen to hide in. The second that guy gets spotted by the enemy Shimakaze, somebody's going to get hurt. Real bad. It's probably not going to be the enemy Shimakaze. Why isn't he using his guns? What is wrong with you? There it is. Yep, that's all it took. High explosive loaded, shots out at the enemy Shimakaze, who is instantly smoking up. Now this is good news and it's bad news. It's good news because if the Shimakaze's hiding in a smoke screen, he's not going to be doing any spotting. But it's also bad news because Quagsire is spotted. And there's a Hanover and an Henri IV up there. The Shimakaze, however, doesn't appear to be slowing down enough to actually stay hidden inside his own smokescreen. It's like he can't make his mind up. Do I run for it? No, he is slowing, so you're only going to get this one chance to hurt him. And that hurt. That hurt a lot, but it wasn't enough. And you're down to half health and you're on fire. You're down to less than half health and you're on fire. But the St. Vincent does get the British battleship, Super Heel. So he is able to basically print himself a new ship, providing the ship hasn't taken large amounts of armour piercing or citadel damage. And so far at least, well, so far, he hasn't. I mentioned earlier that he wasn't fighting this flank alone because there was an Izumo and a Shimakaze with him. Well, there's no longer a Shimakaze with him, and the Izumo tucked in behind the island there isn't really being much use to anybody. So that's suboptimal, but it's not Quagsire's biggest problem. His biggest problem is where he is right now, on the map border, heading south. He doesn't want to get any closer to that lot, otherwise they're going to clap him right through the bows with their armour-piercing shells. But, well, he can either stay on the map border broadside onto them and slow down the longer he stays on the border, or he can head south to get away from them, exposing broadside to them. Oh, there's the Shimakaze again. Still has the high explosive load. Oh, and he's disappeared. Oh, and he's back. Yeah, if you can kill the Shimakaze, you should. Because his only hope now is to go undetected. So shots out at the Shimmer. And he's just praying that the enemy aren't loading armour piercing. Oh, another good hit, but not good enough. Fortunately, everybody shooting at him does appear to be loading the high explosive. Well, this is good news. Well, it's not great news because the thin armour on this thing means it takes a lot of high explosive damage. But you can heal back the high explosive damage, and high explosive shells aren't going to clap you into oblivion when you show broadside to big guns like them, in the same way that armour-piercing shells would. But you can't plan your entire strategy around hoping that the enemy are going to be dumb enough to continue firing high explosive at you. At some point, you're going to have to start angling. The thing is, you can't angle away because you're on the map border, so you kind of have to angle towards them. And that's dangerous too, because they can clap you right through the bows with their armour-piercing shells. Quagsire has, however, been extremely fortunate here. I mean, you know, skip bombs coming in from the enemy carrier. I mean, that hurt as well. But instead of clapping the bejesus out of the thinly armoured, broadside-showing battle cruiser, the Hanover, who is now turning broadside on, and is finally shooting at Quagsire, and yeah, that really hurt. But he had spent all the time up until now, instead of shooting at the extremely vulnerably positioned floating citadel that is Quagsire's St. Vincent, he instead chose to fire at the angled Ismo tucked in behind the island over there. Now, he did sink the Ismo, but look at what it cost him. So, good news, sunk the Hanover, can now get off this map border. Bad news, the Henri's still there, the Shimakaze is still there, and the Hanover has just been replaced by the Schlieffen that just turned up. The team's 200-point lead has narrowed to around about 100 points, and the enemy team are about to equalise on cap circles. Their kill advantage has also evaporated. They've now suffered 5 casualties to the enemy team's 4. And 3 of those 5 casualties include every single destroyer on the team. The team is now a destroyer-free zone, and the enemy team have 3 destroyers, all of them, which I probably shouldn't need to remind you is incredibly bad news when you're sailing around in something as big and obvious as this. Oh, and the carrier's taken a brief break from ruining Stats Bloke's fun over there on the other side of the map in the Plymouth to come over here and ruin Quagsire's fun as well. Quagsire has, however, at least been joined by a Georgia now to replace the Ismo that was just sunk. And, well, the Georgia is at least providing a distraction. Oh, crap. I'll bet you those torpedoes are going to hurt more than the carrier's airdrop torpedoes. Oh, no. Oh, that's bad. That's really bad. If those are Shimakaze torpedoes, even one of them is going to hurt. But he is able to get this thing turned around quickly enough to not only avoid the torpedoes, but the act of turning to avoid the torpedoes meant he dodged the shots from the Schlieffen over there, which is incredibly good news. And at least somebody has taken the bait provided by the Georgia, and they're shooting at that rather than Quagsire. And the Georgia is an actual battleship. It can take the hits. Quagsire very definitely cannot. Did you notice, by the way, the friendly Hanover's pink? I've only just noticed it now, but it actually started the battle pink. Let's just stop and think about that for a second. Do you have any idea how hard you have to work at being a dick in order to turn pink for friendly damage in a game where there is no friendly fire? I always used to say, give people the benefit of the doubt. When you see a pink player on your team at the start of the battle, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've been a dick. Because accidents happen. And I've seen people turn in a completely unexpected direction and just sail straight into friendly torpedoes, despite warnings. Sometimes I've seen people absolutely doing it on purpose just to grief you into turning pink. But there is no friendly fire in World of Warships. How do you even do that anymore? Well, anyway, that's a question for another video. In the meantime, Quagsire is somehow still alive. I mean, in a battle cruiser that's got worse armour than some cruisers, he's still pumping out the damage. And the enemy team are still choosing to focus the Georgia instead of him. You know, the ship that does actually have some armour. Yes, but the Georgia's got 18-inch guns. So does the St. Vincent. And it's got more of them. And it's easier to kill. Meanwhile, well, a quick look at the scores. Things are not going well. The enemy team have 3 of the 4 cap circles. They've managed to sink even more ships, including Killabin in HMAS Brisbane, who got focused down by 2 enemy destroyers, the Forrest Sherman and the Halland. And, well, you know what the rate of fire of those things are like, so that's not entirely surprising. Stats Bloke has just managed to kill the enemy carrier. And he did it right before the Georgia went down, so these guys are now going to be forced to focus Quagsire, because there is literally nothing else over here for them to shoot at. And of course, even though Stats Bloke has killed the carrier, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, doesn't mean it cannot continue to ruin your fun. Here it comes with more skip bombs. Yeah, that really hurt. And there's not a lot of power left in the heel thanks to the combination of armour piercing and citadel damage that Quagsire has taken. He's desperately trying to get some shots out at the St. Vincent over there. Almost certainly still detected by the Shimakaze. So while he fights to the death over here with absolutely no support and assistance from anybody, because anybody who did try to fight this flank is dead. Let's just talk about, and I really feel like I'm shortchanging you here because I did watch it happening, but somehow the recording didn't survive. Stats blokes, trials and tribulations in HMS Plymouth against that carrier. Oh, hang on, is this... It is a kill against the Sovietsky Soyuz. Excellent. I mean, I'm not complaining. Kill's a kill. Any kills at this point are good. But there are only 4 of them left against 6 enemies. Enemies who now have a 100 point and 2 cap advantage. But while Quagsire continues to valiantly fight his corner, you can see Stats over there in an extremely beat up HMS Plymouth. Stats, as we'll see from his post-battle results screen, scored more than 400 hits on enemy ships during the course of this match. And he only did 76,000 damage. And the reason for that, although he did very well in experience earned, but the reason he got 400 hits and only 76,000 damage was that more than 200 of those hits were against the enemy carrier. He had to hit that carrier in a 6-inch gun-armed cruiser more than 200 times in order to actually sink it, because 160 of those hits either shattered or ricocheted. Even when you catch one of the twats, you're not allowed to hurt them. Sadly, I think the writing's on the wall for Quagsire over here. He's just used his last heal, and it didn't do a lot. With 270,000 damage done and 3 kills, I think he's and he's on fire, and his damage control's on cooldown. The enemy team are 100 points and 2 kills up. The Henri's closing in, and yet, strangely, for some reason, despite the fact that Quagsire definitely did just fire armor piercing, 18-inch armor piercing, remember, at that Henri, and they've now been joined by the enemy St. Vincent as well. The Henri decides, in a cruiser, with not a huge amount of health, now would be a great time, presumably in order to try to get torpedoes away, now would be the fantastic moment to turn an exposed broadside to a ship armed with 9 18-inch armor-piercing firing guns. So, I mean, it was inevitable at this point that Quagsire was going to go down. There is no way he was ever going to survive all of that, but he managed to take 4 of them with him and has done more than 300,000 damage in a ship that, while it might be heavily armed, has a pitiful amount of health and worse armour than a lot of cruisers that you see at this tier. Unfortunately, it's now 3 against 4, they're still behind, and the Hanover, who somehow has managed to contrive a way to turn pink for friendly fire damage in a game that doesn't have friendly fire, is deciding that now's the moment to attack. And it kind of is, because they need kills or cap circles. And Statsbloke has just nailed the Halland, which isn't enough to put them ahead on points. But that Hanover choosing to attack with that amount of health, you had better kill something, and it had better be good, because you're about to die. This Hanover, by the way, who thus far in this battle has done absolutely nothing other than sail circles around this cap circle. But he does get the Shimakaze. It costs him his life, of course, and a Shimakaze isn't worth as many points as a battleship, so they're still actually now even further behind on points. Both teams have 2 cap circles, so unless something changes, the enemy team are going to win because they've got the same amount of points coming in as Statsbloke, Killerbin, and Quagsire's team. But they have something the enemy team does not. They have a carrier. A Russian carrier. What's the big deal there? Well, technically it shouldn't really make much of a difference, but the difference between a Russian carrier and every other carrier is that while other carriers make multiple strikes from the same flight to do their damage, and often do make multiple strikes, the Russian carriers only get the 1 strike. They deliver all of their damage up front. So, let's be generous and call it the theory rather than the excuse, is that this is a good thing. Because unlike against other carriers, where it doesn't really matter how much damage you do to the attacking flight, they all still get through, at least in the first strike, and often in the second strike too. But damage that's done to a Russian carrier's strike matters, because the survivors don't loop around and come back and cross-drop you from another side. There is no second attack from the same flight. It all happens up front. So any aircraft shot down actually reduce the amount of damage done to you, and that's true. The problem, of course, is that Russian carriers are balanced around this. They're balanced around having some of the aircraft shot down when flying into strong anti-aircraft defences, which means 2 things. First, if you don't have strong anti-aircraft defences to begin with, Russian carriers are going to fuck your shit up. And even if you did start the battle with strong anti-aircraft defences, by the time you get to this stage of the battle and your superstructure has been ravaged by high explosive shells and most of your AA guns have been knocked out, you definitely don't have strong AA anymore. Which means that Russian carriers and British light cruisers lobbing shells over islands, completely out of line of sight, at targets that have been spotted by Russian carriers, are definitely gonna fuck your shit up. And now Statsbloke and the Nakhimov just have to avoid dying to the St. Vincent for the next 2 seconds, and that's going to be a win. I think we can probably all agree it was Quagsire of the Pond here in HMS St. Vincent that did the lion's share of the lifting in that battle. I mean, 303,000 damage. That would be an impressive amount of damage done in an arms race battle. And 22, look, count them, 22 fires set. But I think we can also probably agree that it didn't hurt the team's chances to have a surviving Russian carrier intact at the end of the battle too. And we should probably take a quick look at Statsbloke's post-battle results screen as well, just for the lols. Because he had a pretty good game as well. I mean, 4 kills, only 76,000 damage done. I think he accounted for most of the enemy destroyers, so that explains the low damage. But of course, the other thing that explains the low damage is that he spent a good 2 minutes trying to kill the carrier. And, of the 414 target hits that he inflicted during the course of this battle, more than 200 were against the carrier, and only 40 of them did any damage. The 160 plus others all either shattered or ricocheted. Honestly, I feel like I'm shortchanging you here because I watched it happening and I was laughing my ass off the entire time. Well, I was fake laughing, but the tears were real. I mean, look at the aircraft he shot down. Remember, 2 minutes of shooting at a carrier. It was like, look, will you bugger off? I'm trying to play here. And was forced to direct all of its efforts against him. And he only managed to shoot 17 of its aircraft down. Like I said, I'm fake laughing, but the tears are real. Anyway, there it is. More than 2,000, substantially more than 2,000 in the case of Quagsire up there. Base XP for Quagsire of the Pond, Statsbloke, and unsurprisingly, the carrier, in an extremely hard-fought battle which most of their team were desperately trying to throw, but which somehow they ended up turning around at the very literal last second into a win. Now I think you all need to go and have a nice lie down and give your backs a rest. And I hope you've all enjoyed today's video, because that's it. It occurs to me that all 3 of these guys stream World of Warships live on Twitch, so if you enjoyed what you saw here and you want to see more of it, well, I'll put links to their Twitch channels in the video description. But that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.